I'll give you a little. Okay, we're on. All right, John. We have John Hogue here on channel 27. Thanks so much. You were here before. And I wanted to thank you for first getting me on Coast to Coast. Our interview made it on there. So, you know, I love speaking with you. You are, just make sure I'm on mute before it starts talking again. And you are so great to talk to. You know, we really have some awesome conversations. So I wanted to do another video on the eclipse. I saw your new book that came out. And, you know, there's a lot of tension in North Korea. There's a lot of tension going on right now. And I'm feeling it. I'm sure you're feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. And I wanted to bring you on to talk about the eclipse and what you thought was going on. So I want to tell everybody your book, your website and everything first. So if you want to give that information, how to get a hold of you, how to get in touch with you, because people always ask me, how do I get in touch with John? How do I get in touch with John?
Best way to get in touch with me is to go to hogueprophecy.com. That's HOGUEPROPHECY.com. And also join my Facebook page. You can also join my newsletter, the Hogue Bulletin, which is free. You just click on you'll see the little links at the very top. And there I have 3 must-read books, which will kind of be what we're talking about today, covering North Korea, the Great American Eclipse, and some of my astrological predictions that take us into May of next year. So you can see a little short synopsis of each book and their table of contents. And if you feel moved, click on the Amazon button and you can see it and do a one-click shop.
Good, thanks. Okay. All right, so let's just dive into the details.
Yes.
Tell me, I saw you wrote the new book. It's The Great American Eclipse 2017. So if you want to give us some little previews about what it talks about.
I have looked over over a decade or so, I've noticed an interesting pattern, actually since 1999, when a eclipse at the track of the shadow over Europe was actually described by Nostradamus in his prophecies over 450 years before. And so it's kind of the great 1999 eclipse of August 11th of 1999. And in his book, I think what he has done is he is taking 3 eclipses and turning them into one vision. He often does this in his prophecies. The first time I discovered this is when he wrote in 4-line quatrains details of maneuvers, military maneuvers that definitely did happen when the Germans invaded France. But one line was what happened in World War I. The other line was a maneuver from World War II, and back and forth. So I thought, you know, I think sometimes he telegraphs, it's like a multiplane of the planes of time. They come banging up on each other. And I think he sometimes made the mistake of seeing one thing that was actually several things. So with that in mind, I started looking at this interesting process with the 1999 eclipse, which according to his statements in the epistle, which is one of his 2 rare prose kind of stream of dyslexic consciousness letters of prophecies. And in that, he basically described a great earthquake, the motion of the world disturbed, that it would be he actually goes through a long apocalyptic preamble of all these things that were going to happen. And then he says, but before these happen, this portent, this great eclipse, causes the reversal or the downfalls of nations and mighty empires through natural disasters and also upheavals of what sound with him often is not just earthquakes, but eruptions in the economy, eruptions in other things. So what then happened in the 1999 eclipse is that within less than a week after its shadow crossed from England over Flanders Field, which is what he described would happen in an eclipse at the end of the millennium, near the end of the millennium, 1999. It goes across Greece, across Turkey, goes down through Gujarat, India, all the way through the mid-drift of Iran before that, and then ends going out. The shadow leaves into space in the Bay of Bengal. What then happened within 6 days after the eclipse had touched 90% to 100% totality over a lot of those regions, the Izmit quake in Turkey hit right where it went total. Was within 90%, not total. And that killed nearly 50,000 people. And then within a few weeks after that, there was a great quake outside of Athens, which fortunately did not kill so many people, but it damaged and knocked down about 50,000 houses. Then about 3 months or so after that, farther down the line in Turkey, the people that in a town that's near in Anatolia that were celebrating the eclipse, a lot of those roofs collapsed and 800 people were killed. And then it jumps about 18 months later to Gujarat, the land of Kutch, which is the westernmost state and province of India. After that, it's Pakistan. And where it went total, there was a vast earthquake that actually hit about 5 days before I was due to fly into India to go to an ashram, to be in Osho's ashram, where I often go. And I actually saw, it was so devastating that it looked like trees, lines of trees were grown somehow in a rock quarry. It wasn't even structures, it was just piles of where buildings used to be, stretching out to the horizon. Just the trees were standing. And it was such a devastating quake. Initial estimates were 100,000 died. Those were reduced quite a lot, but the devastation was remarkable. 400,000 structures destroyed, all the way to Ahmedabad, the capital. Then several years later, 4 years and 4 months after the eclipse had struck its total shadow over, ironically, a large ancient city on the Silk Road in Iran called Bam, or Bam.
Yeah.
Either way, it's kind of a dark irony. It really, well, it got slammed and bammed, Bam. And it was a town of 97,000 people, upwards of 50,000 of them became casualties. It was absolutely razed to the ground. With 100,000 people displaced in the surrounding regions. So I saw an interesting pattern here. There were seven, so the book goes through all of these quakes. And there was also a tsunami in the Sea of Marmara in Turkey. It was about 8 feet high. And a lot of the ports around the northeastern corner that got hit hardest actually sank 6 feet, the port areas. And in an instant, it looked like a ruined Venice, where people could boat around the streets. So significant quakes seem to have happened just a little less than a week, and then about 3 months after, and then 18 months after, and then quakes kept coming. Even the Andaman Islands, where the eclipse shadow lifted off, it also had a tsunami about 4 years later. And I thought, okay, we have the great eclipse of 2009, which is going to take off where what happened in the Ran of Kutch was ending in the last eclipse, even though the shadow crossed into the Bay of Bengal. Though the place that was so seriously visited by the 1999 eclipse was going to see the shadow pass over just a little south of it in the other part of Gujarat, not the Ran of Kutch, and then start this long shot. It's the greatest eclipse in history because the most people saw it. It passed over the Ganges Plain, the heavily populated Ganges Plain, where hundreds of millions of people watched it along the Ganges. Then it also was an eclipse that had nearly 6 minutes of totality, because it was during a supermoon, which also is seismically significant when the moon's closer to the Earth. Right. And then it went up through Sikkim, India, into the Himalayas, into Bhutan, all through eastern Tibet, and then came across the mountainous eastern Tibetan Chinese Himalayan areas that are always a hotbed of quakes. And then it passed over the next great populated zone of the earth, the Han Plain of Han China, over Shanghai and Guangzhou, and sort of millions and hundreds of millions more people saw it. It then it then went over the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, making Honshu 60 to 70% into the totality's shadow, which is an important point to remember. It went all the way into the deep South Pacific and lifted off somewhere near Tonga and the Samoan Islands, just offshore of them. Within a month, Samoa had major tsunamis, and Tonga was also visited by 50-foot, 114-foot waves. Fortunately, the loss of life was light because people got to higher ground. Then you had Sikkim hit by quakes that also was hit with a totality. That was the Himalayan province of India. And Bhutan was also seriously hit with a quake, which it had not received quakes. They call it the blessed land, the happiest place on earth, the happiest people on earth, the kingdom of Bhutan. It's a Buddhist kingdom, kind of secluded, tries to keep its happiness until and not let the negativity of the world get to it. It has not had, in a seismically active area like the Himalayan chain, it hasn't had a quake like this for 300 years. This eclipse broke broke the peace. Now you go to the Chinese area where 5 major quakes happen in the next 5 years. And it's intriguing because every year there's 4s and 5 moderates to semi-moderate quakes all through there. It's one of the most seismically active areas in the world, but only where the 90% happen, except for one 77%er in the Burmese part of the Himalayas. All the rest of them were 6 and 8 and 7, and they only happen in that 5-year period in the areas, the totality to 90% touched, except for 177%. So I'm looking at that, and then I'm seeing in 18 months again, exactly 18 months after the eclipse, the Hogue tsunami and earthquake hit, the 9-pointer and above, the Honshu Islands, making the famous chain of tsunamis that crashed in and just washed away whole cities and villages, and also created the ongoing disaster of Fukushima, the nuclear reactors, which strangely enough, my brother was involved in the project to filtrate the uranium waste in the water systems. So about a month after it happened, he spent about 3 weeks at ground zero in the completely lead-built center, observing the filtration system works. So he's one of my very close contacts, as well as my brother, my older brother. He was there. Hey, I'm happy to announce that he's not glowing in the dark.
Oh, man.
I used to say when he came home, I said, well, you can just come down the road. You won't need to turn on the lights. We'll see you coming. But being an ever mobile Gemini, he was famous in the place for constantly looking at his Geiger counter, constantly looking and moving to the places that were. So he was probably the least hot person there. And then he joked with me saying, radiation's not going to kill me in Japan. It's all the cigarette smoking. Everybody's a chain smoker. So anyway, so there was a pattern. The pattern was that with 99 and the 09 eclipses, there's usually a flurry, either it's within a week or up to 3 months. There's a flurry of major quakes. Mm-hmm. Then there's a pause of 8 months to 18 months. And then you have some other big quakes. And then the quake episodes dwindle, but the biggest sometimes can be upwards to 4 to 5 years after the totality had hit. So now, if great empires and kingdoms are the interests of Nostradamus, I cannot imagine in this prophecy how he could overlook the most powerful superpower in history as being a part of this eclipse prophecy, which takes three. This is the third eclipse now coming all the way around the world. Because where this eclipse started, it's kind of, if you clock all three of them, they pretty much have done, not exactly, but they've cast their black their black ribbons. Mercury's in retrograde, that's fine.
I know.
In Virgo.
Gosh,
So
fun.
yeah, so, and it circumnavigate the earth. And so here we have on Monday, I'll use Pacific time because that's where I am. You know, at 10:16, this is first off, yeah, 10:16. I'll just tell you, it starts in the northwest where I am. Where I am in Whidbey Island, we'll get probably a 93% totality. So it'll be getting pretty gloomy here, but not the full shadow. You'll probably see it off to the south, like you see when you see sunset and you see the shadow of the earth coming up.
Right.
And then, but over this area of north central Oregon, it's going to cross over. It almost touched only 13 states, except for a little bit of real estate in Montana, a very small area, just a tip. But it would have been an intriguing numerological coincidence if it actually had hit just 13 states. For 13 is an important number for the United States, even to this day. We don't have 13 stars because we've built a lot more states, but we still have 13 stars and stripes. So 13 plays a very strong number in America. Lucky 13 for us most of the time. It crosses over the United States, and what it ends up doing is these quakes that happen in the other eclipses, these quakes were over sensitive seismic zones. It doesn't mean quakes are going to hit or tsunamis are going to hit in places that are quiet. But if the eclipse passes high seismic zones, it seems to trigger something in them. I mean, I start the book talking about a superstition that I learned while living in India.
Not to look at the eclipse.
Yeah, not to look at the eclipse, stay indoors. Pregnant women should stay indoors, meditate, not go underneath the total eclipse because of cosmic forces that are released. And every superstition has a kernel of truth. And there is definitely something released. And it's not just released in the earth shaking and moving. There's also what I call in the book the unconsciousness quake, where masses of people are seeded, just like this. You know, it doesn't happen right away. So it seeds something to sprout later. And so that has much to do about what happens to the reversal of nations. And the thing that's so intriguing about this eclipse, this great American eclipse, is it's the last time it happened was in 8th June 1918.
Right.
And that was the year that America, you could say, broke out and became a world power, because it was America's doughboys that were coming in by June at 300,000 a month. They were that by manpower alone, and also at the time of the eclipse, the Battle of Belleau Wood in the Second Battle of the Marne was happening. That was when we turned the tide. American divisions actually blunted the edge of the Germans' final invasion, the Imperial Germans' final invasion or offense. And that was the end, beginning of the end for them. So America suddenly came out as it was America's century, as the world power and influence in history. The center of Europe had shattered itself with World War II. The center was moving now over the Atlantic. The epicenter of history making was for America to do, whether it did so or not. Now we come to August 21st, 2017. And basically what you have is an eclipse that is eclipsing the hegemonic century of America. I foresee that now what we're going to see is the beginning of the twilight of this. And what is intriguing in my studies of myth that I go into in this book, well, first, a lot of things covered. Before I go into that, what would cause this thing to happen to the American hegemon? Well, of the 5 major seismic zones that are in the lower 48 states of the United States, 4 of them are touched 90% to 100% by the shadow of this eclipse. The Cascadia subduction zone, where I live, 100 feet above sea level on my island, I might add, with intention. You have the subduction zone that's being crossed. The subduction zone is potentially as big a powerful quake maker as the Banda Aceh quake that shook waves across the Indian Ocean in 2004, and the Tohoku quake, maybe even stronger, because of some evidence that we know from the Japanese exactly the day when this quake happened in 1700. Because they have notes of it back in 1700 in January where no one saw it coming. These huge, apparently, tsunamis, much bigger than the things that hit in 2011, came out of the blue with no quake. So nobody had been warned. So nobody started running to higher ground. So they were all in their fishing villages, and suddenly here comes the water. And apparently it was much higher and much more devastating than what happened, and killed 50,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so they think that what happened in 1700 was probably a 9.3 or a 9.5 or even 9.6, like what happened in Chile in the 1960, the highest recorded quake. Now, there's been some changes in geology where they think we may just, the worst that could happen would be an 8.5, but anyway, the thing is that we're so unprepared for it on the Pacific Northwest that they're estimating that 10 to 12,000 people would be drowned by the tsunami alone in our area. And it's not a very populated area either. It's not like Japan when they lost 18,000 and they saw it coming and they're prepared for it. So that could be a devastating shock to that region, which is one of the most productive regions, the window to Asia. The eclipse then passes over the south end of the Yellowstone supervolcano caldera, which is dormant. I don't foresee any upheavals of an eruption, but it may, but the seismologists have said if there's a shifting in the lava of the largest lava lake that's known on the planet, that could cause upwards of 8 or 9 seismic quake in the Rocky Mountain region. Now, it doesn't mean it will be that high, maybe a 6, maybe a 5, but still, that's the worst case scenario. As the eclipse passes, roughly on average, the 70-mile wide shadow is passing at roughly 2.5 minutes wherever its totality is. It goes right over Carbondale, Illinois, which is going to be the biggest totality, about 2 minutes and 33 seconds. Just south of that, within 95% totality, is the entire network of the New Madrid fault line, which in 1811, 1812 had 3 quakes and a major aftershock. That if that was to happen again in the Mississippi Valley Basin, Memphis would be leveled. St. Louis would be severely damaged. And a lot of the bridges would go down. The Mississippi actually changed course and for a time had waterfalls in the 1812 quake, which was a time when there were just a few mountain men and cabins and the Indians scattered around. And even then, St. Louis, which was just a little trading town at that time, hundreds of structures went down. And it was it was just 1,500 people. Now it's the metropolitan area is 2.5 million.
Wow.
And so Memphis is 1.3 metropolitan area, 1.3 million. What happened then is a handful of cabins that were there at the time all went down. So So that's a significant shock to an area that's the most unprepared seismically, architecturally for anything like that, being brick and mortar cities. Now you think this eclipse would have its day and be done with America, but the one place on the East Coast that it passes out into the Atlantic to where the shadow drops off Cape Verde Island, some few hundred miles south of it, off the coast of Africa, is the one high seismic zone of the East Coast, which is the Charleston, South Carolina coast. Now, in the Charleston quake of 1886, which was, I believe, 7.5 to 8 magnitude, it destroyed Charleston, and the radius of the devastation went all the way to 60 miles beyond the city. So it would be a significant seismic event. And being that it's an intraplate, both the New Madrid and the Charleston quakes would be in what's called intraplate zones, which means they're in old tectonic plates which tend to resonate to much farther seismic waves, much farther from the epicenter than we have here in the West Coast, because it's more new tectonic material. So when Charleston quaked, people felt it all the way to Cuba.
Wow.
And when New Madrid went in 1812, the church bells were ringing like crazy on their own accord in Boston and New York. So everybody in the East Coast, third of the country, is going to feel it. The areas that are going to be devastated in the case of New Madrid would be northeastern Arkansas, western Tennessee, southern Illinois, and the Missouri Heel, where New Madrid is, and all the way up to St. Louis, Missouri. And the last one that actually created a lot of lakes around there were created by tributary rivers that were blocked by the movement of the earth and created some large-scale lakes around New Madrid. I mean, we could see maybe the Mississippi would be blocked or something. So significant hit to the Midwestern transport hub of the United States, and then South Carolina. So when I looked at this, I remembered my mythology studies and kind of back to the same theme about superstitions or mythologies. It's possible that, the fabled stories of Atlantis, which seem to have a ring of truth because we call the Atlantic after Atlantis. I mean, it's like, duh, look at that. It's a pretty big reason. It's beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the Gibraltar. And that was what the ancient Greeks said. So it is about the great prideful hegemon of antediluvian times that preached one way, became technologically advanced, was kind of bullying around other countries, and was getting to a point of just extreme pride and aggressiveness. And then in one night, it was destroyed by natural disasters and sank into the Atlantic. The memories of all the myths all around the northern Atlantic rim have very similar names to Atlantis. The Basque, who some believe are surviving DNA material witnesses in their DNA of Atlanteans, they call it Atlantica. In fact, theirs is the closest name to Atlantis. The Irish called the fabled land Avalon. The Mesoamericans called it Atitlan. It's very similar names. So, and it's very similar stories from people who shouldn't have known anything about it from one side of the Atlantic to the other. So in this book, I try to explain that there's this thing called what I call prophetic hyperbole. And that's where the emotional impact of the mind of the prophet who's seeing the vision, it has to pass through the mind and the tea strainer of that mind and take on some of the taint of the mindset of that time. And also the emotional bodies need to emote from seeing stuff that's just so alien and unusual. And, for instance, when Nostradamus writes about the motion of the earth stopped by such a powerful earthquake. Well, in one point, he's right. The major earthquakes that go up to 9 or above, they do actually slow down the rotation of the earth a few hundred, a few thousand milliseconds. So they do alter the earth's rotation. But the way he describes it in the language, it looks more like a pictorial version of what he's seeing in the locale that he's seeing being shook down. And it's probably such a powerful, with hollow mountains of man falling and all that, that he just suddenly takes on his apocalyptic conditioning of being reared in the Catholic faith, born of Jewish parents, and they all converted before he was to resist being shipped out of Provence in a pogrom, a diaspora. They all converted, but he was programmed to be a Catholic, and Book of Revelation was in his head and might actually come out in his imagination. That's the other tainting that can happen from this. So I put that all in mind, and I say, look, I'm not saying that America is going to sink into the ocean. I even talk a little bit about the earth changes prophecies of Edgar Cayce, which were so right in the first wave of things he dated, but nothing happened in the second that would have seen the coast sink in the west all the way to Nebraska. That didn't happen. And Florida and Georgia and a lot of areas going down. But the thing is so I basically talk about how the Americans are so much like the Atlanteans. We Americans, in fact, Ruth Montgomery used to say in her books about this, in her axis shift books and all that, in her predictions with her group, her guides, that Americans were actually a lot of reincarnated Atlanteans at this time. And we're facing a same karmic lesson of getting too big for our britches and pushing the world around, thinking otherwise. And I mean, one could argue with the military industrial complex being so big, a economy, our main economy export in the world is war, and overseeing wars and getting into wars. And, you know, and if the president of Russia and America try to make peace, we sit on them with both parties in the Congress. You can't do that. It's almost like they're saying, no, we're the war makers. What's going to happen if you get peace in the Middle East, you resolve Korea, or you resolve the Cold War where we've set up for our business with Russia since 2014? You're screwing up our business, which is war. We have become the new Atlanteans. And it would seem by coincidence or divine providence, we shall see, this eclipse that's coming over this country is going to humble the hegemon, and perhaps will be the catalyst for getting this something's got to give in this country. We talked about this before. This is like, we are stuck. Now we got this new thing going on where I'm writing an article for the weekend about it, probably upset a lot of people, but it's kind of a take that I don't hear being said out there about the car ramming into the anti-fascist protesters and the right-wing guys trying to keep the statues of Robert E. Lee, ironically, who was against slavery. I don't know if the liberals know that. So I talk about the war, the new war between two sides, two extremes that cannot see how they perfectly mirror their imperfectness. The most vicious battles always happen between two extremes. The Eastern Front in World War II between communists and fascists was the most vicious front in the European theater. And if you take in the fact that there was a lot of latent racism in the Imperial Japanese Empire and the United States against the little yellow people, the racism that was involved in that, and only that series, The Pacific, actually looked deep into that. Very good. The same people who did Band of Brothers did that, where it showed how racial the fights on the islands were between both sides. And so I talk about, you've got what I call right-wing and left-wing supremacists.
Right. Exactly.
They're
couldn't be any worse.
And isn't it interesting with all the talk about this man who drove his car, and it's terrible what he did. he intended to do it.
Right.
But what about the man who shot all the congressmen when he found
Right.
out they were Republicans?
Right.
What about all the people I've seen on camera if they wear a red Trump cap or mugged by all those lovely liberal supremacists?
Yeah, nobody talks about them.
Yeah, because CNN and they don't talk about it. I mean, you get a little more of an angle on it on Fox, of course, denying
They're
the
getting
right.
bad, you know.
And I just see through this crap on both sides. And I've said before in my articles that right now, if we did a list of how many assaults and outrages that have happened, unfortunately, there have been more from the liberal supremacists than the right. Now that the right's getting, the supremacists are starting to get riled by all this, they're probably going to catch up. But I'm sure the news will blow out of proportion that. I mean, I was watching Rachel Maddow last night saying, and here's pictures, these guys, these white supremacists are marching with their torches. And it was a peaceful march, by the way. And they weren't doing Nazi salutes or anything like that. They were just marching. He's saying, and now so many of we're hearing reports that so many of these guys, because they were caught on camera, they're losing their jobs. Thank you very much to their families and all. I mean, I don't support either extreme, the left or the right supremacists.
Neither of us do, yeah.
But I do support, yes, I do support the First Amendment. I do support the right of free speech. Those people who don't want those statues pulled down have a right to protest that. And there's also the Antifa groups that are highly organized that go in there starting riots. I've seen it.
They're paid too.
In Seattle, they're paid, they're organized, and they go into a situation to rile the situation. They're no different than the guy crashing his car into those people.
Right.
But you're not going to hear that in your news. And so the news, once again, is I look at the news now, and if there's a thermonuclear war on this planet with Russia or over Korea, the press will be responsible for it. Our irresponsible news outlets are fomenting and feeding for ratings a doomsday scenario that they cannot survive. It is so repugnant to me. And this I've always seen was the dark side of journalism. I've dealt with journalism since 1987. I've dealt with it in Rajneeshpuram, Oregon, and saw how they created a climate in America. They had a public policy, an editorial policy at the Oregonian, never to say anything positive about us. And I know because I interacted with their reporters who stayed with us. And I'd say, why did you have them? Your story that's not the story that you wrote here and I saw. That they changed it. What's that all about? And I found out. Said, we'll get fired if we say anything positive. You're supposed to be the new Jews in America. Like you're Jews in Germany. We're not going to say anything good about you as a religious minority. I know what that's like now. And it played very strongly. And that's nothing compared to this, because this could end your future, all of you, and create this story that's not real about Russian hacking, and more evidence at Hogue Prophecy I'm going to release that's going to show that's not being reported by your mainstream news. And this is important because I mean, I'm not sympathetic to the Russians. I'm sympathetic to you all having a future and your children having a future. And we're playing right into the Nostradamus prophecies that said the West would go crazy, see the world as it isn't, plan a war with the East, and create this thermonuclear conflict.
And John, let's think about this. I mean, the people, how we fight each other. I bring this up in like every video. Once again, the news, Donald Trump didn't say it fast enough, always something to make him look like a horrible person. We look like a bunch of lunatics. Okay. Everybody. Why? We're fighting each other over craziness, and that's the start of it. It's literally, it's embarrassing is what it is, right?
It's embarrassing. And what And what he said, what Trump said, even in the first press conference, was actually right. It was correct. There's a lot of abuse on all sizes. There's a lot of, and he's getting punished for actually saying the truth.
That, like usual.
And yeah, and I mean, he's got a lot of faults, but let us get perspective, American people, before you blow up the frigging world. Get some perspective and calm down and count to 10, because for one thing, also what happens in Charlottesville is one incident. There's millions of people living quite peacefully who voted for Trump and for Clinton that are not like this.
They're normal.
They're normal people. And the deplorables are not all in that sack that Hillary Clinton put them in. There's the vast majority of the people are not that way.
Right.
And in this book I'm finishing on Trump, which would be probably the most unique take that's out there, that President Trump predictions, which will be out probably end of September. I had to put it aside when he hit Syria and started the Korean Korean book and Syrian book. Dennis the Menace. So the precocious child got me there. So anyway, I'm going to be fair with the whole situation, including with Trump, like I was with my first book, which predicted how he could cause this surprise victory over a year before it happened. Anyway, the thing is, so that's happening. This resistance that's going on with people. We need a shock that will throw us out of this. It's like we're not the sleeping giant of the Pearl Harbor era. We're the sleeping giant who's having a dream and flailing around in the bed, hitting his wife and his kids, everything. He's got to wake up from this polarization nightmare. And what could happen that might do it are a string of natural disasters that would, and also the book also goes into how the heat is really on with global warming. And it is, the climate is going to change and cause Pearl Harbor moments. The natural disasters, which some have theorized may actually be correlated to the increase in the heat, the rising of the ocean, even if it rises a half an inch, multiply that weight across 5/10 of the planet, it may very well be just enough to cause more seismic activity in the subduction zones of the Earth. And look, just when this heat started really getting hotter after 98, you had the 2004 December Indian Ocean quake. You had 2 tsunamis in Chile, in the southern Pacific. You had the Tohoku tsunami and subduction zone. I've never seen this in my lifetime. This many major tsunamis all coming at the same time. The aggregate of the Earth's temperature is rising exponentially.
John, what do you think about this might sound a little too woo-woo, but I mean, I kind of personally believe that you and I and everybody on this earth that can literally put out energy, when we put out that harsh energy, it's shaking up the earth, right? In a way. So in a way, when these fights happen, Mother Nature takes her course and shakes up the earth, right? And I do believe our temperature rises, we get I feel it. I feel this eclipse. I do. I wake up pissy in the morning. There's no lie. I mean, it's true, but it's tension. It's tense and everybody's feeling it. And do you think I think like that, but it can possibly do that?
The whole existence is one great holism. Everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
And not only are we increasing with our thoughts this idea, but I have a book I'm going to release around Halloween, appropriately, which is going to look at all the prophecies I've collected over the years. It looks at mass madness that the native peoples of all over the fourth world, all over the planet, have talked a lot about how at a certain point, if too many people are living unconscious lives, spewing their thoughts and their unconscious motivations and things and emotions into the psychic ecosphere.
Yeah.
You create a wave, a rise with the population and a fall as the population falls. You see a world that the new normal is crazy. I mean, are we not in the last 20 years come to this point in a kind of crazy reality show world, idiocracy and all?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we're seeing the normal ways of leaders across the world. You know, the press that I've never seen the press get stuck on one story since a year ago during the Democratic convention and just can't let it go. Even when they're getting constantly drilled with fraudulent, that's not true, the source is here, not true, your producer's caught on camera talking about how it's all BS.
Yeah.
And yet you just can't let go of this delusion that the Russian hacks happened. And you know, how do you explain the Russian hacks taking down hundreds of city councils, local government councils taken away from the Democrats, state senates taken away from the Democrats? It sounds to me like it's simple, just bad politicking.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is focused on Washington, and the Republicans, who are a little smarter politically, realize that the real power is in the states and in the local governments. And so they've literally taken away 1,300 seats. If you look at all the different seats, governors, mayors, senators, state congressmen, they've taken them away and put Republicans there because they understand politics. I mean, the only thing that's happening here is stupidity, political stupidity.
And you know what? I think it's horrible that you and I or whoever, like, I think it's bad that you can't even support the president. Like, or people lash out. Like, I lose deals or I'll lose sales if people know that I support our president. Like, I would support whoever was in office, you know, just out of respect. And I think it's really upsetting that if like somebody hears that I say something positive about Trump or like give him a chance or he's doing a good job. How about the fact that the economy is going up or something positive? It's so negative. It's like slamming him left and right, make him look. And it's I would be fighting like this and probably saying the same thing if it was, you know, I don't know, Joe the builder, right? And he was there. I mean, same thing. It's a principle of respect.
You have to respect, you know, and if you're a citizen of the United States, you have an obligation to know your Constitution, to support it. I mean, it's not just the president who swears an oath to it. If you want to be a citizen of this country, you've got to understand your responsibilities as a voter. You've got to understand that we have only done electoral presidential elections and not get your shirt blown off by finding out that we won 3 million votes more than Trump and still lost. Well, that's not how it's done here. And if you knew that's how and you didn't like how it was not done, why didn't the Democrats, when they had the Congress from 2006 to 2010, set in motion an amendment to abolish the Electoral College? That's how you counter whatever the Republicans are doing by taking people off voter lists. Or you can even do it now in your states if you just change the rules as they're interpreted in the state congresses, and senates. You can, in fact, many states have done this, and they're close. They're a couple hundred votes away from getting 270, which means that the Electoral College will still be there. You don't need to go through the amendment process. You will actually, by interpreting the laws, to say, well, here are our electors who are what the people really vote for, not presidents. Our electors in our state, no matter how many or few, will not choose the majority who voted in our state. They will choose, because it's a federal election, the majority of the American people. The majority of the American people. That was Trump.
Don't worry, that happens to me all the time.
That's Hillary Clinton thing. Don't tell him this. You know, so you will.
That was Trump calling us. Same thing.
Yeah. Anyway, you basically can have your electors say, we will vote only for the winner of the popular vote because it's a federal election. And if it's good for all the other elections we do in our states, what's wrong with popular vote for the federal election?
Right.
You know, so
Oh, so funny. We always have something. It's always something. It's okay. It never fails.
yeah.
At least we're on. At least we figured it out.
We're live. See, that's folks. It's live. so yeah. So anyway, you have a situation where if it's actually the consequence of a dumbing down of the nation over the last 30, 40 years, where civics has been taken out of school. And that has been done purposefully to turn all you into stupid sheep. and so that you get upset like children about, whoa, Santa Claus didn't come. Well, you know, Hillary didn't win. Well, you don't know how your system works. Well, he's not my president, not my president. He is your president, legally, right, according to the laws. And if you're going to follow the laws of the land, which a republic is basically, I mean, res publica means a law, government by law. Mm-hmm. And if you don't follow the laws, you have to follow the laws, even the ones you don't like, and then you fix them, you change them, you go through the process, which is there in our republic to do that. But you don't go on the streets and start burning down halls where maybe some alt-right conservative guys from Breitbart is going to speak. You don't sit there like Rachel Maddow, who I'd prefer to call Rachel Mad Cow sometimes, where she, last night, I couldn't believe, my jaw was dropping. I could not believe it. She's sitting there, back to those four guys that were filmed doing their First Amendment right with tiki torches. It wasn't like Nazi torches. It was tiki torches. It was rather festive. They were marching and standing and watch over Robert E. Lee's statue. And she's looking there going, well, these people, kind of inferring how stupid they are. These dumb, like, kind of racist in a way, like the dumb white people, the dumb white rednecks.
Right.
She couldn't see herself as a Jewish American being as racist as people against her. And so she's looking and she's tweaking her chin and she's saying gleefully, well, now those people, they don't seem to understand that now they've been photographed. And kind of encouraging this to the audience that was there. They're photographed. They're on camera. Many of them are losing their jobs right now. They will always be remembered for the rest of their lives, as if people can't change, that they are right-wing racists.
Right.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You, a Jew, talking like that, like a Nazi yourself, mm-hmm, taking a section of people, marginalizing them, seeing them as all one thing. Is that not putting yellow stars of David in your mind on all those people and making them just one group, not individuals like you who may make mistakes, like you who maybe if you use reason and talked with them, you would get to know them and maybe help them see another world?
Exactly. Seriously, that's the truth.
And how and what righteousness that you, with the power of the media, a Jew can say to these people the kind of things like, we've got you on a list now. You've just put a Star of David on all those people and it doesn't matter now. And you're gleeful about it, that these people, I mean, what kind of hatred latently is that, Miss Maddow?
Yeah.
You are hateful to these people in exactly the way that you think, without even talking to the people there. Yes, some of them probably are, but you might get surprised by why some of those might be there. Some of those people might be there because, frankly, why is Robert E. Lee having his statues pulled down like Saddam Hussein? I mean, that shows the ignorance of the people of the country who don't understand it. Robert E. Lee, after the war was over, said, okay, we fought the war. We tried for 40 years to solve this problem with race. He was anti-slave anyway, said he was going to let go of the whole slavery thing in Virginia. He fought in the Civil War because Virginia went over to the Confederacy. And you got to understand, in those days, that was your nation first in the Union. He was good. If Virginia had not done that, he was going to command the Union forces, because Abraham Lincoln asked him first to be the commander in chief of the Union. And instead, because I can't fight my own people, he said. And he was against slavery. He worked after the Civil War. He was a great agent in bringing the country back to healing and together. And you ignorant sheeple are going to pull his statue down, not knowing. All you can do is say, Confederate, racist.
That's the new thing now, it's just.
So that's liberal supremacists.
They're worse, John. I think they are. They're just, and because
you watch, they're going to do more violence. They're going to have their car they've already done it. They shot up a whole bunch of congressmen and their assistants at a baseball game.
Exactly. And that was like just something real quick we got to hear about,
and then gone.
And it's
move away, nothing happening here,
Yeah, no big deal, right? It's like,
and again, it's similar. One man, one rogue person, a sick person kills or tries to kill congressman. One sick person on the right rams his car into a bunch of people. Deal with the sick people. Don't use that as a catalyst to put armbands like in Dachau and stuff on everybody. Oh, these are all Jews. These are all white racists. And I'm going to write about it in my word about this in an upcoming article. It's terrible what the media is doing. So all of that is a nightmare that we're in the sleeping giant of America that is growing and growing and growing. That's something like natural disasters or the climate change bringing on the understanding that we're collectively under emergency could awaken the sleeping giant of Americans to put aside these petty, childish, hysterical habits to work together. We're going to need each other to rebuild the country. If a quake hits the Midlands of the Mississippi region, it will affect everybody in the world because it'll take this economy down. Yep. And for all the bickering in Congress, it might take, unfortunately, a major quake to take down the crumbling infrastructure to get the Congress to come together and finally get us an infrastructure program to rebuild the nation's grids and prepare ourselves for the 21st century. But here's the thing. This book sounds pretty terrifying, but it actually has one of the most uplifting, this Great American Eclipse book, has one of the most uplifting endings I've ever written in the 43 books I've done. It looks at what's beyond the age of the hegemon for the United States. And I tell you all, it is the brightest future and America is ever going to see or has seen. It is where this country, once it takes off its prideful, egoistic trip of hegemon, it will become a brother nation among brother nations of significance, of course, but it will become the cradle of the new religiousness that will come when the shift of east to west and west and east is complete. You can see the east is becoming at last technologically advanced. The west has been, the east has been sophisticated in its religions. The west has had pretty simple religions. So in the spiritual world, the east has been far more spiritually advanced, some people might say, although that I would just say that I wouldn't say that, but that's what some people would say. The point being that spiritual evolution has been the more intense work of Asia and the East than it has been in the West. We have been into, and both have given the world much. Well, it's going to come to a balance in America based on a Native American foundation. Many of the things that have been coming East will amalgamate and unite into a whole religious understanding that will make this the new India of the Aquarian age. And it will be a beautiful thing to happen to this great land. So,
chills.
Yeah, it's something I've wanted to write about for 20 years. Now, with this work, I have many things under my Renaissance shirt here that I'd like to share, but I wait for with prophecy, it's all about timing.
Yep.
People are ready to hear. Otherwise, pearls before sheeple.
True. I wanted to ask you one more quick thing though. Okay. Because we had the North Korea thing, right? Yeah. And then today it seemed like it simmered down a little bit. And, but when we look at the charts, you and I both know they look a little scary. Okay. A little dicey. And the reason why I believe it, like it's so real, is because when I do readings for people and I'm confirmed every day that astrology is 100% accurate, and then you see something like in the charts that are so profound and so perfectly aligned, where it's with North Korea and with Trump's chart, right? Because that's huge, like in Vedic way, right? And it's funny you said about the eclipse with the Rahu Ketu, or with the 18 months, because that's the cycle of Rahu Ketu. It's 18 months, right? North node, south node. And that's because that's what the eclipse is. That's why, let's say that. Why? Because Indians don't look at it because it's Rahu and Ketu. It's the serpent. It causes the shadow over. That's what these points are in the sky. Rahu and Ketu aren't planets. They're points, north node, south node, right? And so it's like, it's scary a little bit to know that and to see it all aligned, and with Trump's chart and Korea's chart, North Korea's chart, it looks a little frightening. So,
well, and also north node, south node is often the indicator of destiny.
True.
And destiny of individuals, destiny of the world. And to simplify this, but not make simplistic what is going on, is this eclipse, with what's going on with Saturn and Mars. Everything started really heating up when Mars also entered a fire sign, triggering again that window of war where there's a trine actually going to happen between Mars and Saturn. I try in the book to explain that trines, one has to look at one's own biases even with trines. If you look at the rise of Hitler, there were a lot of trines that supported his rise. If we just think, Hitler only gets squares and
yeah, right.
This is naive. The trine means good for whatever transpersonal thing. It means favorable for war, favorable for love, favorable for these things. And so we have a very war favorable trine coming up right around the time of the eclipse of Mars and Saturn. I think Mars is in Leo and also on Trump's ascendant in Leo, and his natal Mars in 12th house. And then you have Sagittarian Saturn, who last time Saturn was transiting Sagittarius about 30 years ago. Many things happen, but the significant thing that happens is things come to head with religious extremism, or this kind of extremism between alt-right and alt-left extremists. It tends to take the Jupiterian energy of Sagittarius, of the higher mind, and turn it into religious and political extremism in its darker sense. And unfortunately, masses of people tend to be the least conscious assemblies of human beings. So masses that identify as nations, as this or that, or religions, tend to err on the side of the negatives of the potentials and the positives. And unfortunately, that's why I've been so accurate about predicting political astrology, because I don't pretend Pollyanna-like to think otherwise. This is politics. It's the lowest form of political of consciousness. And unfortunately, the lowest form, it has the most influence on our world right now. Right. So the thing is, you have all that happening, and then Saturn goes direct on the 25th of August after being in a long retrograde as an Earth planet and a strong influencer of quakes and tsunamis and movement, but also as soon to be returning into its rulership in Capricorn. You're going to see in the next series of months a lot of issues coming to a head in earth signs related to economy as well as earthquakes. And of course, one begets the other. If an earthquake can upset an economy, it's also there. We're also seeing that this buildup of a positive economy reminds me a lot of 2007, and we might be coming to another recession pushed by some event. Certainly a war with Korea. Now, here's the thing. I have a premonition meter. I wrote a book about it, Nostradamus Premonitions of 911, which is available as a book as well as an ebook. I wrote it back in September of last year, and I have a thing that's happened 3 times in my life, gone full 10, the scale of 1 to 10 of premonitions in my body, starting in my hara. I went to a 10 when just before my 8th birthday in October of 1962. And it was all about a crash of a plane that I thought was going to end my parents' life because they were going on a turboprop to see Jack Kennedy, who was going to be in Las Vegas. He was scheduled to be there, and they had the tickets, and they might actually meet the president in the Dean Martin show. So they were all excited. But as this little kid, I had this incredible premonition. I saw this flaming jet engine in the field, and I saw them dying. And then I was just inconsolable. It was so bad that my grandmother found the phone a system in the airport, and they got them. Will Irene or Bud Hogue please come to the phone? And my mother had to talk me down to it, but she was so convinced. I just was inconsolable. I was trying to come out of it. I couldn't. I said, I can't get it out of my little between my sobs as a child. So she forced my dad to get air flight insurance before I got on the plane.
Oh my God.
And they came back fine, but Kennedy didn't show up. He had gone, he had a cold in Chicago, went back to Washington, D.C. And what then happened, so Sunday was fine, then Monday was the bombshell. That was when he announced to the world on television that we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that the closest we ever came to destroying the world. So as a child, I talk about Jung's visions that he first internalized narcissistically, as the ego naturally does at any age. Something wrong with me, I'm feeling weird. But then if you go deeper, sometimes it's not about you. Of course, the second premonition was about me. It was my brush with death. About 40 minutes before it happened, I had a huge premonition of something was going to happen. I was going to get on the car and go to this center. And then 40 minutes later, I was hit in Long Beach, California by a guy running a red light and hit me right in my driver's door. And I was not of this world for about 20 minutes.
Wow.
That changed everything for me when I came back. That's a whole very interesting story. And for those people who've heard me tell the story before, in this version of the book, I tell a lot more details about it than I did before, about where I went and choices I was given and how it kind of influences my forecasting work ever since that happened when I was 25. Then the third premonition in the book, the climatic one, is very similar to what I'm experiencing now. It was a slow burner. It started in March when I came back from India from the ashram I go to. And it started building from March and came to a climax on the 10th of September, 2001. It was March 2001 that I left India. And that was the one where I was able this time to consciously anticipate that first it was very impersonal, and then it ended up, I realized it wasn't about me, it was something about the world. And I kind of tuned into spirit and I said, what's coming? And it said, be prepared.
Yeah.
Next morning, I'm hearing my Australian agent tell me to wake up. And I eventually get up and he's telling me all the things you talked about since 1983 are coming true, and the terror attack on the towers is happening. And so then I saw that this was the meter for that, the indicator. So now I'm in a similar slow burn. And it sometimes goes from 2 to 4. Like it went up to 4 suddenly. And I'm rarely upset by these things, but it felt really psychologically disturbing. And it was just the day after it went up there that the Congress decided to basically take the powers of the executive branch away from the president after he had had such a good meeting with Vladimir Putin in the G20 in Hamburg, both parties almost unanimously voted in favor of a new sanction regimen that even the president couldn't change. They basically tied his hands to do any negotiations of peace. And so it then died down again because, fortunately for all of us, despite all of Trump's faults, his unpredictability factor is his natural state of being. So it's very, very possible that he's not somebody that will completely be controlled by Breitbart and Bannon and the alt-right or the generals, or he could just as easily tomorrow get on a plane, Air Force One, and go to Pyongyang and solve the problem with these.
He could, and then that could be it. What if it's totally twisted like that? Because that'd be kind of funny.
Well, and
they'd probably still hate on him for something.
Oh yeah,
he took a trip. It costs too much money.
They hated on him for getting along with Putin because my God, it's going to ruin the war market. How dare you? He's the guy that hacked, which isn't true, but I've never seen this country be so willing. And I mean, what thing you think happens to a country, a super nuclear power like us, with the other superpower nuclear power?
Right.
Now, they may not be a huge power anymore, but they still have actually more nuclear weapons than we do, 8,700 to our 6,000 or 7,000. But we have NATO's to throw at them, so it's about the same. What do you do when you're having problems with in the Cold War, when we had problems with the Soviet Union, we talked to them.
Right.
We tried to sort things out. We had our count to 10 moments in our lines not to cross, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was a miscalculation of Khrushchev. It wasn't malicious in a way, but it was a miscalculation. He didn't understand he was thinking, we got missiles pointed at us 80 miles over the horizon, pointed at Crimea right here, where we're having vodka and having a nice time at my dacha. Why can't we do that 80 miles to pointing a few missiles at Florida? Isn't that fair? Of course, never knowing that unlike Russia, which has had 500 years of major superpowers on its borders invading it, America never had. We were the bully. If we were going to invade anybody, we push on Canada twice, failed. We take a third of Mexico because we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Do it. Come talk about abuse of power and crimes against humanity.
Right.
And frankly, because we did that, we kind of stifled Mexico's growth and made it the struggling nation that it is today. So we don't have in our neighborhood anybody that can pick a fight with us. So by putting all those missiles in Cuba, suddenly it's like the Americans lost it, because it's like, oh my God, there's the big red dog is in our backyard,
Yeah.
As LeMay famously said in the tapes of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then afterwards, McNamara and some of the guys, after that weird fellow left, said, we're going to go in the backyard and look at the big dog out the Oval Office door. And so fortunately we had Kennedy there. So anyway, this Trump and Kim Jong-un are very similar in their mindsets. I've they are bluffers. They're big bluffers. And double dare you? I'll triple dare you. Oh yeah?
I know. It's like agreed. But I do think, I don't know about the whack job, but I know Trump, I do believe in my heart, Trump has good intentions.
He does. Yeah. He does, actually.
Whether he makes because he tweets some shit that's a little crazy, which yes, whatever. But, I can feel that when he does that, because I would do the same thing. That's why I'm not running for president. I'd be like, because if you're hated on and you're constantly look like this horrible person all the time, right? I mean, there's only so much you can take before, I'm surprised he hasn't snapped way more.
I am also surprised because in my astrology book, looking at the vernal equinox, which I produced 2 weeks before the great eclipse. It's like John Hogue's worldwide astrological predictions. I talked in detail about how this is like the worst time of his life ever, the most challenging time, from mid-July through, and there's waves of
November.
November. And it's like, he's, this is any other guy might have nervous breakdown, or he'd quit, or get a health problem. But maybe because Trump is kind of this incorrigible 8-year-old at heart, it just water off a duck. And because he's a mutable sign with that Uranus on the back of his sun sign, like a monkey on his back, and there's this quality about him that makes him even unpredictable to himself and not latch onto that stuff, even though he's got the strong fixed Leo. But that gives him the strength and the focus to just keep going. And anyway, he's been through a zoo after zoo. If anybody studies his life in detail like I have, his life as a realtor mogul in New York, dealing with the mafia, you cannot build buildings in Manhattan in those days without going through the mafia too, and the kind of colorful political creatures.
Yes, and you have to be in for building. I'm in the home building industry. I know you have to go into politics. You have to deal with that because to get buildings approved. So that's, I think, why he started getting into that politics realm, was to get buildings approved. And then it eventually,
we want to rebuild America and have Trump freeways and Trump bridges.
And because if you listen to any of his messages, even from he has never switched his message on the presidency, what he would do. Those things haven't changed. I mean, the interview with Oprah, it's not like he's got in Vedic astrology. So, we do different calculations, guys. That's why everybody's probably getting confused. But in Vedic way, his moon is in Scorpio conjunct with K2. And I know in my heart that because I have K2 in my first house, it can diffuse things. Okay.
He is a diffuser.
Your emotions can really shut up. That Mars Leo, blah, 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 blah. Luckily, he has that Western way and Vedic way. That's all great, right? But he can emotionally, he's about as calm and collective that there can be. Don't get me wrong. He could get mad, I'm sure, and he could throw a tangent, but it's more of an act because deep down inside, he's not going to make rash decisions with K2 conjunct Moon in Scorpio and Anurata and Jason. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and in Western astrology, it's that 12th house Mars. He's Mr. Aloof. He's not. Even when he's in the crucible of the social Gemini activity, there's also this feeling like he's removed inside from it all. Right. So it doesn't get him. And anyway, he loves his narcissism. He loves the attention. So, he does. He does. And, I have to say about narcissism, I've had people, especially in my town, which is pretty deep blue here in the south end of Whidbey Island. People keep saying how much, he's such a narcissist and such a narcissist. And I said, look, you've got an ego, don't you? Yes. Well, you're a narcissist. It's all in degrees. And sometimes you can just think about yourself all the time. And maybe you're one of those narcissists who hides it being a spiritual person, and and then you're still focused on you. Look at me, I'm so humble and spiritual, and I love everybody.
Those are the craziest usually.
And I tell you, scratch the surface of those people.
Yeah, right.
They are it's like I never go to peace rallies anymore because the most violent people I've ever met, the people who have a volcano underneath their peace.
Yep.
Are peaceniks. They are suppressing a lot of war. And so I want to keep this body, many things could happen to this body before I'm naturally going to go, but I don't want to poke the buffalo. So I just watch those. I watch the peaceful people demonstrating from afar. Right.
It's like, it's scary this day and age though, to even speak about the wrong thing or say the right, it's constantly, if you say one thing, people are like, oh, you're racist. No, I'm not the most unracist person there is. Matter of fact, the people that are those white supremacists. I actually hated those people because I grew up with those people in Pittsburgh, and they were the ones that made fun of me. So like, I have a totally different, I just hate everybody that's mean to anybody, that's a psychopath, that has too much time on their hands to do anything like this. It's just focus your energy on something else. That's how I look at it. I mean, it's just
and what's happening now is, and what's also happening now is the country is becoming a country of, we're all about what we're against.
Yeah.
We're against this, we're against that, we're against, and I'm saying, like, what are you for?
Right.
Why do you think the Democrats lost the country? Because they didn't talk about what they're for anymore.
Right.
They just got into this, Trump is this terrible guy, put $1 billion budgeted campaign to slam this guy with thousands of ads running across every 24-hour cycle. They were just like, even the funny story is, in one of the primaries, he's having a golf tournament and he's there visiting, and all the TVs in the main room are, all they're doing on the Florida TVs is just show these awful character assassinations of Trump while he's got guests. I mean, he talks about it. Yeah, I hope these guests, I want to turn the TVs off. It's like, and that campaign completely failed. And it was like $100 million campaign from the Bushes and some other people to take him down. And it's like, if you want to defeat Trump, be for something. So don't belittle other people and judge other people as racist or this or that, because who are you? If you really take a look in the mirror at yourself, who the hell are you to judge others?
That's right. Anybody should ask themselves that.
But what are you for? That's creative. That's inspiring. Americans live to be inspired. Right. Every 30-year Saturn cycle, we like to redefine what the American dream is. And if we miss our chance during the 3 years or so of the transit in Scorpio, especially because of the connections with business and commerce and all that are so much our society, we suffer a karmic period of 30 years of consequences. We're in that period. It just ended a couple years ago, so we missed our chance.
Well, here's the scary part. In Vedic, it's still there. It's in Gandanta. So it's even more intensified with everything that you say.
Well, that's interesting, because that's why I like Vedic so much. It does a better job than Western. And of course, I use any divination tool just to get into the zone. But I like how I kept feeling, no, we're still in it. And I write like we're still in it, even though it's Sagittarius, because in fact, it's coming to a head. We American people, if this is how you're going to redefine yourself in the next cycle, as what you're against, you will destroy your country. Yep. This country will unravel into a rabble.
Yep.
And so, but now we have this new invader into our lives. The press, the media has become this. It's a very interesting thing. The media, for the most part, are owned by the corporations, who vast majority of the energy and money that they gave to the presidential elections of the last 3 cycles were to the Democrats that were running for office. Because since Bush left, it became, the Democrats became better vehicles for corporate interests. I mean, Citizens United happened on Obama's watch, where we basically lost our republic to corporations who can now, through their free speech called money, can pay to get their legislators bought. And so we're already adrift as a republic. We lost it in 2010 during the watch of the Democrats in office, during the watch where a hell of a lot more money was given to the people running for president. Hillary Clinton was their heir apparent. And the Clinton News Network and MSNBC Clinton here or there, and all the main media networks, they are just going after Trump because he was not supposed to be there. Even though he's 1%, he's a rogue 1%er. He is not in the pockets of the corporation. They're trying to actually isolate him and co-opt him. And when they see they can't quite do that, that's when he'll go. It won't be the Democrats doing it. But still, the network, the whole background propaganda organ that is owned by the people that mostly donated for Clinton, the super owners of these big networks,
right,
except for Fox, she is still running the show. They're playing our person didn't make it, and we're going to do all we can, propagate all the kind of hyperbole and fake news that we can generate to drum up an overthrow.
Yep.
This is so un-American.
I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, though. I think that's going to all get busted this eclipse. I do feel like her stuff's going to come out. Her skeletons are going to come out. Yeah. She's already getting reinvestigated. I think that's going to be like the twist, you know?
I'll tell you plainly, she's probably going to go to prison.
I think so too.
Because what's happened, and the Clinton Foundation is finally going to be exposed. It would have been exposed if she had been president. The thing that's happening with this, it's all because of this one man, which I'm writing about in my next article stream at Hogue Prophecy this coming up this weekend. There was this man that was a close confidant and a geek guy who helped with security stuff on the passwords of Wasserman Schultz's office. She used to be the DNC chairman.
Yep.
Until she was caught in the act by a leak, not a hack.
Yeah, a leak.
To Julian Assange. And this man may actually be the man who did it, because he had access to her cell phone passwords and to the passwords of hundreds of congressional people. He had an open door to doing all of this. It's either him or the guy that got killed, shot in the back in a quote unquote robbery.
Yeah.
Who actually Assange said was the other person that leaked. The other thing too is there's a group of retired CIA operatives and analysts who came together. Their right, left is bipartisan. They all came together and they looked at, and they did a very interesting search into how the timing at that time, technology could not have made a hack that fast of that amount of information, but a copy leaked, yes. And they found the time codes. They actually show it was sourced in the East time zone of America, not in Moscow.
Yeah.
And that it actually happened. It was a leak because a hack takes longer for the information to be gathered and taken off site of the DNC mainframe. Also, the DNC mainframe was just like Hillary's mainframe. It was off, unsecured, with some mom and pop group of people who were not secured by the Secret Service.
Yeah. Weird. That's awfully interesting.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. So that's coming up. And I'm going to talk about that because it's coming up in news feeds that are certainly not owned by the corporations that wanted Clinton to be there. Yep. And so this is all going to eventually come out. And the other possibility is that when the country is hit by these shocks that are coming in the next 5 years, starting perhaps weeks after the eclipse, shocks that might deal with war with Korea or a close call or something, as well as quakes hitting Pacific Northwest, the central Mississippi Basin, things like that, that Trump has an opportunity, and I said this in my first book about him, an opportunity to be the next Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to actually be defined as many great presidents are defined, not that they are great, but they become great by dealing with great emergencies or things that bring the country together. Now, I don't know if he's going to pull that off.
I think I do.
It's there for him. And he's a surprise man. He's a man of surprises. And I even will put it past the audience here that I wouldn't even be surprised if in a year's time, Trump turns 180 and says, we're going to do a policy on global warming because it is true.
Exactly.
And we're going to rebuild the nation, getting everybody back to work to be the arsenal of ecology, just like FDR was the arsenal of democracy, because we're in a similar emergency.
That's the way he is. He listens. He listens to people's opinions. He's not sitting back like with the trigger, like everybody thought, just blowing people up. Like that's what people initially thought. And you know, he doesn't want anything to happen, for God's sakes. He's not a freaking monster. You know, he's not.
Well, people got to understand that Trump has a monumentalist ego. In his narcissism, it's about a man. And I tell some of my liberal friends, I say, look, don't kind of, yes, he is a narcissist. So if you're going to empower your communication, talk to somebody who is a narcissistic monumentalist. So one of the greatest, even happened today with a reader who came in all half-cocked, and in one of my readers that I corresponded to, and I had to point it out to them. And fortunately, this person understood it after I pointed it out to him. What I've learned as a communicator, and I must be doing something right. I've got over 1 million books sold in 20 languages and 43 of them published, 1,000 articles out there. And I've been on a lot of radio, and I'm on this show, and people want me back. What I've learned from hard time and tears is that if you don't take 100% responsibility for your communications, not one iota to the person you're communicating to. This is something that most people don't do. It's like, you should have understood what I meant. You know, can't you feel what I'm feeling? No, not if you express it.
Right.
And what that is that's you saying, when you say that, you're not understanding me. What you're really saying to me is, I'm not taking responsibility for my communications. I am disempowering myself and pouring my power at your feet like a mess. And I'm blaming you for it, which is, again, disempowering you even further. That's the slave mentality, because you've made the person who should know what you're saying your master, and now you're the slave. It's not understood, the functionary. If you are dealing with an idiot and you want to get an important point across to an idiot, speak the language of an idiot. Then you're empowered. Don't blame the man for being an idiot. If you're talking to a man who is a monumental narcissist, just remind him that you wouldn't want a thermonuclear war to happen, or war of any kind, because Trump Tower would be destroyed. All of your works would be bombed in 30 minutes and gone. The other thing that people might understand is that Trump deeply loves his family. He is very private about it. And his kids are pretty interesting, especially Ivanka.
Right.
And he has deep love for his family and deep loyalty. So to say the man's unloving and all, the man may trash talk and the man does some pretty outrageous things.
And he says some funny shit. Like his mark is what it is. Like he says things that probably, a lot of people do this though. Okay.
Of course. Well, I've said to women who are really upset about being caught on a mic doing what men do, and he was really doing that to Billy Bush to just blow his mind, you know. Because I've seen Trump in that mode with that Gemini tone of voice. He was just BSing.
And if that's bad, trust me, I've heard a lot worse than that men have said to me. Okay.
Yeah, and what I had to say to my lady friends, I said, you know, girls, I'm sure if you guys start talking about people's dicks or something like that.
And it happens.
Talk
about it.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like the mysteries of sexuality captivate both sexes. But if I got a mic and put you on the mic and broadcast it on national TV, what would be the proportion of your little slip of being of just being people?
Right.
And that's the problem with Trump. Sometimes Trump, with all his powers, he's just being like people.
Right.
Like the most powerful man in the world typing out a tweet that many of us have typed out in our day, but we're not the president of the United States.
Right.
affect global policy and economy.
Right.
Although sometimes when he did that, it had a good effect, like when he tweeted about Boeing and the expensive jet, and Boeing's stock went down. Boeing had to fix that problem. So it's not always a bad thing what he does with his tweets.
Yeah.
I always say with Trump, just quickly, and I'll let, is that it's always with Trump is for better and worse.
Yeah.
And better and worse. Yeah. And better and worse.
Yeah. But that, you know what, that's life though. And that's the reality is he's a real person. Like he's not, he, you know, when he said drain the swamp, I swear, like I was dying. Okay. And then he did it to drain the sewer. Right. So now it's like a new term. Like the terms that he comes up with are just, they're ridiculous. And yes, but I can appreciate some of the things he says because quite honestly, I don't pronounce things and have this like elaborate speech. I speak what is on my mind, brutally honest, blunt. You're going to like it or not. So like for me, I understand why he does that. So, but unless you're like that and you can get it, like I kind of crack up and then I'm like, oh God, did he really say that? Did he really say that one? And then you're like, oh. But you have to laugh about it. You know, better than the secrets, the closets, the shit that people do behind the scenes that normally, you know, the whole Clinton craziness and all that, the pedophile stuff, the Petergate. This is stuff that people need to look at because he was tapped for 2 years. If the only thing that they got on him was what he said, oh my God, trust me, it's not that bad. Yeah. Right?
Well, and then, I mean, this is a joke, but a joke in earnest. I must say, I'm glad, even though I was ready to write a whole book about Hillary and actually astrologically, she is much closer to me with all the double Scorpio stuff in 12th house, which is me in Western astrology. I had a lot of empathy for her astrology and her challenges with her squares with Mars and Saturn in Leo. And if actually she'd been president now, that would have played very interestingly in this eclipse. In her being profoundly squared to make some major mistake because of course it's always with her in her chart. She has not found her center yet to be able from that center to pick right counsel, and she'll ignore good counsel like her husband throughout most of this election, who saw everything that came coming, and she ignored him, listened to this guy who can't even do a password right. He writes password for password, John Podesta, who was probably going to be her chief of staff. And he's got terrible advice. Everything he said was wrong of what she should do politically. But she blindly believed in him because Hillary's main problem with her 12th house issues was and this is also a problem for people growing up in a female body in this world. There's more things thrown at a woman, especially going into power, which was a kind of considered a men's place to be. It's much more harder for Hillary, and she has to do much more than the men around her. And but in the process, she had not yet. And for a person who has similar aspects, I had to, around 21 years old, find my inner voice, or I wouldn't make it to 22.
Exactly.
And so she never quite did that. And so she came to her moment of destiny still uncentered in her integrity, in her goddess energy. And I'm just glad that, on a little lighter note, that I'm glad that we won't have to spend 4 years hearing her channel John Wayne in her speeches. We are not the that got in my ears, that droning, you know. I mean, Trump's got his problems with his twisting of what few words of vocabulary he knows. But at least it won't be this rang. Right.
And somebody that has such sketchy things on their like record, like what they've done. There's so many questionable things. It's like,
yeah. I mean, it would have all come out. It's so ironic how it's interesting about prophecy and the predictability factors. You know, you can see something change. Somebody came in that wasn't supposed to be the person. But I talk about this in the Trump for President book, how almost everything that would have taken Hillary Clinton's presidency down in the first 2 years are all, even though they're coming from a different angle, they essentially, and under different circumstances, they are essentially the same things that could take down Donald Trump in the next 2 years. Issues about nepotism, or the Clinton Foundation for her, the Trump organization for him. Just how much is he influencing his sons, and how much were they influencing him, et cetera, and Ivanka and all that. Very different show, but the same essential problem. The short countdown of Nostradamus for November. Well, actually, it's September through November. It depends when you start counting it. I qualify that in the new Eclipse book, that actually we enter the window when it could happen from September through November.
That's what it looks.
Yeah, that fits the Vedic more, and Hillary Clinton would have faced the same thing, although she seemed to be more willing to follow the neocons' aggression against Russia much more vigorously, and she might have pushed the war, whereas Trump is not so behaving into that scenario. But still, they would have faced the same thing, and it could still happen under Trump. The war could happen. I'm not feeling it. I'm at 2 right now. I'm back to 2 rather than 4 on my premonition meter. You will all know about it if I'm starting to get up towards 7, 8, 9. But I don't feel it yet. Strangely enough, deep down, as dangerous as the situation in Korea is going, I felt more threat for the future with what Congress did to curtail his ability to make peace for the war market, which paid for most of their elections, Democrat or Republican. That brought the premonition up higher than all this Looney Tune bluffing, counter bluffing between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. And so that's a hopeful, positive sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. And
thanks for having me.
You're going to be on Coast to Coast tomorrow, right? So
yes, I am. I'm on Coast to Coast from 10 o'clock till midnight Pacific. So I'm the first 2 hours.
Wow. I have to listen to that. That's exciting.
Yeah. Well, we'll be talking about this and other things. And then the following morning, I have a Russian crew coming to my house. And they tell me that I'm not going to say much about it just yet, but it's a big national show. It's a documentary about the future of 2018. It's going to broadcast at New Year's Eve after the president of Russia makes his New Year's Eve address. And they say I'll have an audience of 62 million Russians.
Wow.
And what I hope will come from that is that I can talk to the Russians. I don't know if they'll let it happen. I'll certainly say it on the interview Thursday morning. So wish me luck on it, because basically I want to tell the Russians about the greatest American prophet, Edgar Cayce, and how he so consistently and bravely foresaw something pretty outrageous for his time to foresee in the depths of the Bolshevik scare in the 30s up through the war from 34 to 1944. He left readings about how Russia, once it got beyond communism, the new Russia that would come after would become the hope of the world. And that it would be about freedom, and it would have assistance from America if America didn't behave like a hypocrite, saying freedom and freedom, but doing just the opposite. Kind of like the way we are in the world today.
Right.
So he left the caveat saying America needs to help its Russian brothers and sisters be that help of the world, because geographically Russia is astride the East and the West. So I hope that I'm going to be able to turn, as an American, talk about our greatest prophet, Edgar Cayce, who saw their future and maybe inspire them also to help this happen, that they're supposed to be the peacemakers in the world. And you would think from the way that I'm sure some people are listening to this now are having a brain melt. If they've been just listening to CNN and NBC and Fox and all that, they're going, oh, that's not what my reality right now, as I've been told to think. The truth is that Vladimir Putin has done more to make peace in the world. And every time he tries it, America slams more sanctions. The war market is more frightened. if Trump and Putin could be let go and allowed to work, it would be a big push towards that hope happening. They would end ISIS, calm down the Middle East, end this stupid Cold War that the Obama administration started with the neocons that he embraced, and that market would then go down. I would all for bankrupting the military industrial complex of the United States. It's not serving my country. It's going to destroy my country if it keeps running into one war after another, because one of these days they'll just, we're treating the Russians like Saddam Hussein. They're not at all that, but they have 8,500 nuclear weapons. Saddam Hussein didn't.
Right, right. It's true. That's so true.
The lion's share of them will wipe you all out in 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
So is it really worth going there for American people? Why not? Even if you don't like the guy, even if he is an oligarch, but even if you don't like the guy, it got in the Cold War, we used to talk to every Russian leader. We didn't say, well, they're our enemies, therefore we don't talk to them.
Right.
Like children. We need to grow up again and act like mature people in this. And ironically, Trump, if he was left alone by the Congress, he would make huge peace breakouts. And maybe it will still happen. I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that to 62 million Russians. I hope it gets through their filters.
Yeah. That's going to be funny. That'll be great though. That's great.
Well, I look like an old Russian metropolitan.
John, you're the best. Honestly, I always love talking to you. So everybody get John's books. I'll put all the links below here. And we'll see you on Coast to Coast tomorrow. We'll
see you. Enjoy the eclipse.
Yeah. Oh, are you going to look? The one last question. Are you going to look at the eclipse?
No, I'm going to actually meditate. I'm going to go in.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be under the shadow. We're all going to go in my backyard's basically a cement turnaround for cars. It's great to put a blanket on and meditate on. So I've got about 3 friends and I are going to sit. And if you all want to join with me, that's great. At the moment, the eclipse totality hits America's coastline at 10:16 Pacific Standard Time until 93 minutes later when it leaves South Carolina at 11:48, I believe, Pacific Standard Time. So you calculate your times. My friends and friends all around the world that I've talked about with this will be in deep meditation. I want to see this eclipse from deep inside. Because that's another thing eclipses open a door to the cosmos too. So as I say, my last line in the new book is "See you inside."
Yep. Yeah. Oh, good. All right. I'm gonna end this and then hold on. Thanks.